Okay, let's get started. My name is Sarah Bostwick. I work at Pixel Agency in downtown Los Angeles, and we make websites and web apps for movie studios to promote their movies. For those of you who are not familiar with the term creative technologist, it's kind of an unusual title, but it's very applicable in our agency as basically I have to do my dev job, but also bridge the gap with the creative team and the business team and pitch technology ideas and create prototypes and be an advocate for the dev team in general. Before becoming a developer, I was a fine artist for many years. And I'm really interested in how web, film, and gaming are converging into one experience of storytelling. So as an artist, I was a documenter. I cast and carved found colloquial architecture, where individuals made decisions, and their history was recorded in the objects they used every day. So when I became a web developer to pay for my art career, I thought I would naturally be a creative developer, which is true, but not in the way that I originally thought. As an artist and a freelancer, I got a bit lonely, so I started working at Pixel as the sole developer, which didn't really help, but then our team quickly grew. We're now about 20 with like 4 or 5 developers and contractors. And at Pixel, I fell in love with designing front-end systems. So I worked on the front end for foxmovies.com, universalpictures.com, fathomevents.com, where I really learned how to work with templates and work with scaling systems. So that's sort of my background. These are PHP apps, but it's the same concepts of components, like these sections that can be reused on movie pages for these 3 sites, and each component can be moved around on the page and have different amounts of data, and like I'd had to account for there being absolutely no data for a movie and then being like so much and having it look good at every stage. And then from this, working on these types of projects, our company learned how to like create libraries. So like this is the social plugin that we use, reused in each project, improving it along the way. But and this is a Swiper.js library, which I love. I put it everywhere. It's a responsive carousel JavaScript plugin. And then we also do one-off sites for movies that are done in Ember. So Ember, like the way we use it as an agency, it's not to create ambitiously large apps. It's to create ambitiously fast made apps, because our creative team comes up with solutions in very short time frames, because we'll get the art from the studios, and then immediately we need to make something with it. So this is an example that where the user can make a custom movie poster with their face in it. So, and then you can customize the text on it. And internally, we call this app the face-in-hole. So it's sort of like the boardwalk, and you have the cutouts of the mermaid, and you stick your face in. It's like an early selfie idea. And so this is the same code base, but it's for animal ancestry. And this is my cat Buster as Diego. This is Zoe as Idris Elba's girlfriend for The Mountain Between Us. And this was something we did in February, just when we thought this code base was never going to be used again. They were like, we would like this in a week. So here is a promotion for Love, Simon, which is a teen coming out story. So you could create a Valentine that posts on social media. So, you know, this is last year's survey, but I'm thinking it didn't change too much. In this sort of idea that most people in this room are working on a product. And I think as a freelancer or an agency, we do much smaller scale things, but Ember still works really well for us. So it's sort of, I wanted to tell this story of how our agency learned about product development through Ember. So we're in the 10 to 13% of doing client work category. So some of the terminology I'm going to use in the talk is, when I'm talking about products, I'm talking about something that is built and then sold. So the features are defined, there's an MVP is created, the product is sold, and then features are added, and it just continues on. And then projects are sold and then built. So like a project has a scope of work, a client agrees to pay for the project, and the project is executed. So these are totally different business models. So why would you, turn projects into products? To make more projects. Let's see here. Trying to go to the next. Okay, so who is this talk for? Agencies, consultancies, freelancers, like anyone using internal tools for repeated projects. So why would you follow this project to product to project pipeline? One reason is to create company assets. So as an agency or consultancy, you're in the service industry, so your assets are the talent in the room. So how do you hold on to that knowledge? One way is to create libraries and templates and add-ons that you can pass on to the new developers. It's a way to revisit your past work in an organized way, and you can make incremented, documented improvements to that. And also, the boilerplate features are done, so then you can spend time polishing and being more creative. So the basic outline of the talk, I'm going to have a case study of face and hole, sort of, and then provide a checklist to decide when to commit, because it is a lot of work, and at what point is this a good idea? Tips for templatizing a project, some pitfalls you can run into, templates versus add-on, like when to choose between the two types of internal products, and some resources. So this is an app that we made for Ice Age. It's 2 years old, so if there's any bugs, don't tell me about it. It's like I built on Ember 2.3, but it was the most fun example, so that's why I picked that one. So this is actually a video walkthrough, just so I wouldn't get hung up here. So the app has like a little intro showing you why you would use it, kind of explaining what happens if you upload a picture and the result you're going to get. So they kind of play with the characters. So you upload a picture of your pet, basically, and you can transform them. Okay, so here I'm uploading a picture of Tomster, and he goes on to an HTML5 canvas, and we use Fabric.js library, so it can be cross-browser. It makes everything easier. And then you can add pictures on top, but the same app, like you can add text on top, you can have branded pictures behind, and it's easily adapted for new use cases. But the thing that we wanted to remember was that like the user wants to go to the next section, or they want to be able to go back and fix their app. So these decisions were, they were all pre-made, and I'm slowly making him into a llama, sorry. I got kind of into it in the video. I'm still going. Add a tail, so he's got a lion tail now. But luckily, I mean, I think this is the end here. Oh no, ears. Okay, so then we can add his name, and then we can make that sort of leaderboard of like what animals, what characters Tomster is now. And then we don't create the share asset right away. We do it when the user clicks the share button. This is a COPPA compliant app, so like children are going to be using this, and there's laws against social activity for children. So we generate the share asset with PHP when you push the button, so we didn't have to create so many pages, but we wanted to have this metadata page with the Facebook share asset that's custom to the one that you made. And then you have a pre-populated suite, And then you can also just download the asset because it's a square asset that you can share on Instagram. And there it is. So that's the basic app. So why I feel like this worked and is a good example is it has consistent functionality and user flow. So we were able to talk well between all of our teams, and they kind of stuck with what we had already, the base features that we already had, and then they just added on to that. And this template was easily, we could customize it really easily because it's all in one code base. Like we had all the projects are branches off of master. So I could see all my past work in one place, or our whole team's past work in one place. And then for when we had different clients, we just pushed to another remote because you can push to different remotes. And I've worked on other projects where this didn't work as well. Like it was too locked in, like I was afraid to change anything because it would affect other projects. But this way, it's all siloed, and you can do whatever you want with it. And then we kept it up to date, which is a small miracle. And it has good documentation. There's versioning, wiki, installation guide. I mean, I made some of these things for the talk, but they exist now, and we're going to keep going with it. And also evangelism. I mean, these are all things that I've learned from Ember, and why we all like to use Ember is because we know how to use it, and we know what features exist. And I think we can learn a lot from that and use that in our own companies. So this is a picture of the GitHub, just all the projects we've ever done. There's like 20 branches of it. And here's the wiki. This is my first wiki. Because this is only good for new developers, but because my creative team is never going to go to the GitHub and read up on my products, but it's good for like contractors and new devs so they can see what the app is about. And sort of, I had like links to asset requirements and design templates and features that exist and things I want to change. And there's a user flow that I made for this talk that it was really fun. I used Lucid Chart. I originally kind of thought this was out of my domain, but I think probably a lot of you in this room have written user flows, and it's a good way to say like when is it going to be saved to the database, and like and also the creative team can look at this and they know what's available to them. And I also made this UX doc because all of our projects are so fast. People will just look at past projects and then make a design really quick because there's no time. So I actually made this UX after I've made the app many times. So I really understood the general idea and how to. I don't want to just keep making the same thing over and over again. I want to keep it open enough so people can make creative decisions. But I do want them to tell the introductory story and show the user what they're going to be making, and the fact that you can add pictures or text and the share flow. And that the whole point of the app is these end assets that the user is going to share. And here's a Photoshop template, but what I liked about this is each layer is a state of the app, so it's all in one place, and it's kind of open. They can do whatever they want to it. This is what the app looks out of the box. It's not beautiful. I wanted to keep it sort of unstyled, so you don't get locked into certain decisions, and you can make whatever you want with it. And these are all the available options. So a new developer can just spin this up, and they can see that you can upload a photo or use a webcam or use photos from Facebook. Here, I use the webcam in the middle of the night. And you can change the exposure. You can add pictures, text, and then, anyway, so moving on. This is my first attempt at versioning. So I just followed Ember's example. I used the GUI on GitHub. That was really easy. And you just type in your tag here, your title, and your description. And then there's this helpful documentation off to the right saying exactly how semantic versioning works, which was really helpful. This is just a picture of our internal wiki, which I hesitated to do because I'm duplicating information from the GitHub and also doing an internal wiki. But my design team, again, is never going to go to GitHub. They don't even have a GitHub account, so it's really important that they understand what's available and that this tool exists and that there's these templates that they can start from, so they don't have to reinvent everything every time. This is an example of, I feel like my documentation is like really serious, and I think it's helpful, and I want people to read it, but my colleague, Azu Luli, wrote 3 pages of documentation about Fox movies, and then I came across this. And it's just some general advice about staying hydrated, and you would think it's just sort of this extra thing and it could get in the way, but I mean, obviously, if you're on the wiki, you don't know what you're doing, so it's kind of nice to have this little friendly language in the middle there, so you actually read closer because you're looking for the jokes. Because I feel like when I read documentation, I just skim it. So I thought this was good advice. And it's good advice to stay hydrated. Sort of a project-to-product checklist. Maybe you have similar projects requested multiple times. You have fast turnaround that would benefit from boilerplate. You're revisiting your past work for the good parts, and if it's mostly the same thing, like you're just copying the app and then changing it, that might be a good template. But if you're picking and choosing little pieces from different projects, maybe those are good add-ons or libraries. So here's a quote from Robert Jackson. So you can, NPM can easily install from Git. There's no need to publish an add-on to NPM to consume it. Obviously, at EmberConf, we're going to encourage everyone to make their add-ons public. But if they were needed to be private, you can include them in your repos this way. So if you wanted to make internal tools, this is a good way to include it. You just have your repo name and your address, and then some tag, some point in time in your library. So some pitfalls that you can run into. The designs and functionality changed too much. So maybe you didn't communicate with your whole team exactly what existed, and they made something crazy, and you can't even use your template, so you should just start over. Maybe their product is too general, like you're recreating WordPress, and you could just use WordPress. Sort of choosing between a template and an add-on, we have a lot of libraries that we can piece together quickly to create these custom websites for our clients, but maybe we could piece together commonly used ones, so you have sort of this combination add-on and template together. So what do I mean by templating? I'm talking about something that has a base app with a design user or a defined user flow. So not just handlebars templates, which maybe some people are just thinking about. They're also templates, but I think the key to good templating is to be specific but open. So having your class names in JavaScript language be specific to the functionality, but open enough to be used in different places. So as the saying goes, naming things is hard. Some things for templating that I found helpful were to print out the wireframes and cut them up. This is an idea from Atomic Design, where you can by cutting up these physical pieces of paper, you can kind of see where the repeated patterns are, and you can just write on those little pieces of paper, what they're called. And also you can work with your UX designer to name things, so you're all agreeing to call things the same thing. So we've gone so far as make a Google Doc to share with the client, so when you're talking about a component, they know what you're talking about, and they're not calling it a module or a section, and everyone's on the same page. I'm also a big fan of BM. I know functional CSS is very popular too, and they're not mutually exclusive, I don't think, but I think Ember really lends itself to this namespace component structure, and so I really enjoy that style of CSS because it enables you to scale your applications. And also Ember really made it possible to have a living style guide. I've always read about it and wanted to do it, but it didn't seem quite like I was going to keep it living. But for Ember, you just put all your components on a page, and you have to feed it the data so you can see the components. But you can actually see when your styles change or your components change, and you can share it with your designer, and they can see what components exist in your app. And so when they create a new page, they can just reuse what's already built. Some tips about template configuration, like we use setting style sheets, initializers for the JavaScript, and services for data. Like our apps don't use Ember data most of the time because they're so small, but it is nice to have like a configuration file, so when you can switch out like the title and the metadata really quickly. So this is just an example of how I set up my CSS. I mean, obviously the component folder might change after yesterday. But we have like a color settings file, defaults and typography, mix-ins, animations. And this is an example of a typography config file and component style sheets. So the reason why I like BEM is because you can just take the component name and put it as a class name on the component itself and name the style sheet the same name, so you can find everything. And I've thought about creating like an extension of the blueprint generator to just automatically add that class to the component, so then I have a starting place. Initializers provide an opportunity to configure your application as it boots. There's two types, application initializers and application instance initializers. For the face and hull, we have an application initializer to configure Fabric.js, so you can set like the corner shapes and things like that before the application boots. And then services, a service is an Ember object that lives for the duration of the application and can be made available in different parts of your application. So this is an example from face and hull, like we call it API, it's not an API, but we call it that just in case we turn it into one. So I just make a constant with all of my data in it, and then resolve it in a promise, so if we do fetch it, eventually it would all work. So we have like settings for like the hashtag and the URL of the website, and this sort of, you can see like where it's configured. There's the Love Simon information. So some resources are writethedocs.org. I really like this resource. It's a wiki with resources for all types of documentation. So for like technical writers, engineers, scientists, they have a conference and a Slack channel and local meetups. And it's kind of nice to talk to other people who actually enjoy documentation, because so few people do. And also, I really enjoyed the closing keynote from last year's EmberConf. It was basically about refactoring without permission, and I found that really inspiring because I did ask permission once, and that didn't work out. So you just have to basically clean your room and your code so you don't live like a hoarder. And that's great advice. So like maintain a product as part of project scope. So when you start off internal product development, you obviously need some time dedicated to that. But to port back features to master, I mean, you should be responsible for that. Like that's part of your job. And also to give presentations to your team and let them know that it updated it, or give an announcement. Like let everyone know that this exists. So lastly, just wanted to mention, product development terminology, which I'm sure everyone in this room uses, but it was new to me working in an agency. So I checked them all out, like product lifecycle, product teams, product owner, product manager, agile, scrum, stories, epics, tasks, sprints. Like there's all this new terminology. And once I realized they were collective fictions just so we could work together, like they're not, well, I'm sure everyone's very opinionated about these words, but I mean, Scrum Master, I didn't want to say it. It was hard. So I read this great article. I can't pronounce the name of this blog, but it was called My 20 Years Experience of Software Development Methodologies, and it kind of just explains that you can try everything and pick and choose what works for your team, because if you're all sitting in a room together, you're going to have a very different needs than a very distributed team. So I was very comforted by that. In conclusion, agencies and consultancies are service industries. Internal products are assets, so you can spend time inventing instead of repeating boilerplate specific to your company. Sort of take the wisdom of Ember and apply the same principles of documentation and evangelism to your own internal products, and get people to use the tools that you create. Thank you.